I think we are live now. I'm guessing everyone like me got caught up in the um, NBA drafts, and let's see. Okay. Uh, yeah. So anyway, where is everyone? Let me check. Uh, oh, there. I see Bill is here, and as I said, I'm sure everyone got caught up like I did in this in the NBA draft. Mr. Carroll, how are you tonight?
So far, so good. And how about you, sir? How are you doing?
Oh, hey, every day above ground is good. I'm
There
fine.
you go.
Good. um, so, have you had a chance to look a little bit at the draft here?
Yeah, I've been doing some, watching and tweeting and watching the usual. But yeah, there's some interesting picks. The last pick was particularly interesting because that kid, um, he's an interesting player, but he's never started. Or since they never started, he started a few games, but he's mainly been coming off the bench, even in college. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can be even I don't know. I mean, I know it's all about projection, particularly in the NBA draft. Two or three of these guys are guys I think will contribute fairly early. Sochan's a guy that I think is probably going to be a bench player early in his career and perhaps his entire career, which doesn't mean it's a bad pick necessarily. It just means it's an odd pick this early to me. I guess is what I'm saying. I get it. He's 6'9" and change, and he can run, and he looks great, and he moves well, and he's versatile, but he doesn't do any one thing all that well. He does lots of things somewhat well. And I know he's barely 19 and all whatever. I, I guess everybody in the NBA, everyone's just saying, well, 3 years from now, right? That's what you do. You look at a guy and you say, well, what's going to be 3 years from now? And could he be a solid player 3 years from now? Yes. I still think he'd be a sixth, seventh guy off the bench, though. So taking that guy in the top 10, I guess that's what they do nowadays in the NBA. They take sixth or seventh guys off the bench in the top 10. I guess
Well,
that's what they do.
eh, we'll see. You know, um, but so far it's been very interesting. But we'll talk about it here in a minute. I want to get a little baseball out of the way, uh, and of course, Aaron Judge is like just knocking the cover off the ball. I think
Yep.
he has what
Yep.
27, 28 home runs now. And he's actually already in arbitration with the Yankees. I think he wants 21 million or something
Yep.
like that. But can the Yankees afford not to re-sign Aaron
No,
Judge?
no. They signed a lot of bad contracts with older players. And Judge is not a spring chicken, but he's younger than a lot of the guys they've given way too much money to. So I'm fine with giving him, as the kids would say, the bag. They overpaid for Giancarlo. That's the real issue, right? Um, a guy who can't really play defense anymore, gives you absolutely nothing on the base paths, is a swing and miss guy on a team that has, frankly, too many swing and miss guys. And then they went and got some more swing and miss guys. They've now started getting rid of some of those swing and miss guys, but Judge is a guy that's not a swing and miss. He's swing and hit. He's a guy that makes contact. And he's a pretty good athlete for his size. I mean, remember, this is a guy that both Michigan and Stanford were high on as a tight end prospect, and at one point was almost went to Stanford to play tight end. So he's a good athlete, but I just worry about them. For me, it's always about pitching, and if the Yankees pitching holds up, they'll be okay. But Aaron Judge is an important player. I just think that the type of player he is the type of player that the Yankees collect too many of, to be perfectly honest. And I say this, of course, as a Yankees fan. I would like to see more different types of players. I'm not saying they have to try to be the, 1978 Kansas City Royals or something with a bunch of, guys who hit the ball off the turf and run for doubles. I'm saying that mix in a little flavor with the 250-pound, 260, 270-pound guys who all they do is hit home runs or strike out.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's a hit and miss, and it looks actually more like an assembly for a football team than it does a
They
baseball
very much
team.
look at the. They have 5 guys who are 240 or above on their roster. Did you know that, James? 5. Their catcher's 245. Judge is 272. Giancarlo's 259. Or some of that are 260 something. There's 2 others I forget, but I mean they have 5 guys who are 240 or plus on their. They are a college football team, basically. Yes.
Oh man, I'm like you, being a Yankees fan. It's going to be interesting to see what happens for the rest of the season. To me, um, by the way, Demetrius is having a party.
Party. Yeah, he's doing a draft party. Yep.
So I'm assuming that that's going to come pretty soon for you, right?
You mean the draft itself?
Well, I mean, you and Mike have so many drafts. I mean, I'm
Oh,
sure.
that yes. Well, I mean, I kind of take the NBA draft off. Clay Holmes, one of their pitchers, is also 245. I forgot about him, but yeah, they are a giant group of people. Gallo is 250. I forgot Gallo's 250. This team is enormous. Judge is now up to 282. Good God in heaven. I mean, literally, he could line up and play 5 tech. So yeah, it's a team of just enormous people. But yeah, back to what we're talking about. So, the NBA draft is completely about projection. I get that. It used to be that it was guys who had played 3 or 4 years in college, had been at least All-American twice. It's like Tim Duncan stayed all 4 years, which, even when you look back on it, it's amazing. But Ewing was a 4-year guy. Chris Mullin. I mean, the game has changed so much. These guys are 18, 19, 20 for the most part. If a guy's 21, they ask, what the heck's wrong with you? What took you so long? Why are you 21? Why aren't you 19? A bunch of these guys don't even have their man's bodies yet. These guys are 190 something. Chet Holmgren is what, 212, and he's 7'1.5" or something. So
I know they were talking about one of these guys a little earlier, and they were when they were talking about. I think they were saying he was 22 years old. And it's like, well, hey, we're really looking for somebody 19, 19 or 20, but you know, I forget which one it was. But you spoke about pitching,
yep.
And so how should we judge starting pitchers? How should they be evaluated? By the number of wins, the quality
Well, I
starts,
mean,
or something else?
my big thing is whip. I mean, wins is beyond your control. I mean, there was a year where Steve Carlton won almost 40% of the games that were won by the Phillies. There was a year he won 27 games, and the Phillies as a team won like 64 or something like that. So it's beyond your control. You can't really control how many games you win. especially now that they pull guys earlier than ever before. So, I mean, wins are sort of an old school, and I'm old school, but they're an old school way to look at pitchers, and it's not really fair to pitchers. There's an old joke I remember from, the Dodgers when somebody said, "Hey, Koufax threw a no hitter," and somebody said, "Who won?" So you can't really control that, but whip, right? Whip, walks, hits, innings pitched. You're looking at walks.
Oh, there's a giant arachnid.
Oh,
It's a giant. You gotta get that spider.
so you are in this situation where
Seriously.
you're in this situation. You're in a situation.
Tell them that you have to go.
You're in a situation where Avery, hold on. You're in a situation where you can only really control what you can control. So how many walks, hits, per combined walks and hits per innings pitched. So if you aren't getting guys, if your whip is under 1, right, fewer than 1 walk and 1 hit per inning pitched, you're a good pitcher. I mean, that's pretty straightforward and simple. Even in the low ones, it's very, very good. 1.25 is about where you get to okay. You're not great. And then obviously above that is not ideal. But, so yeah, you want to, if you have a whip that's 1 or below, you're good. You just can't control other stuff. You can't control, how long the manager leaves you out there. You can't control if you can get run support. You can't control a bunch of other stuff, but you can control, to some extent, how many hits and how many walks you give up.
Okay, so for you, it's whip.
Yep. Because that's something that the pitcher controls.
Okay. Well, yeah. It was just very interesting because I saw the question on one of the sports networks. And I was like, that is interesting. But let's talk about the NBA championships, aka the Warrior Invitational. Uh, Golden State goes on a 3-0 run to win the championship. I think the last time we talked, it was 2-2.
Yep, that is correct.
So, what did you think about? We were all talking about how close this was going to be, and
Yeah, I thought it might go 7 games. I thought the Warriors would pull it out.
yeah.
What I
Well,
didn't see coming
I
was
saw the Warriors in 5, and so I was one
okay.
off.
Okay. I was also one off. We were just one off in different directions. But in terms of things that I saw, now that's a fairly young Celtics team, so they have a good chance to be there again in the future. But they do have some structural issues to fix. Their shot selection and their actual shooting at times really let them down. They're a team that has a bunch of good defenders. They have good defenders in almost every position. They move the ball not as well as Golden State because nobody does, but they move the ball well. But they don't always have the right guy taking the right shot at the right time. And that's the big difference between, this team and some of the other teams we're talking about.
Steph, of course, wins his first Finals MVP. A lot of people were talking. I don't know about you, but when he had that fall and hurt his foot at the end of was it game 4? I think it was game. It might have been at the end of game 3 when they said no. It was the end of game 4 when they were still. I think it was the game before Steph dropped in the 43. And there was that pile up like the one that had put him out for how many games was that when he had played? Who was it? Was it Smart that hit him the last time?
Oh, yeah, that was smart.
Yeah. So what do you think? About Steph's game, and I mean he is 34 years old, but
Yeah,
you
but Steph's
know
game is not built around. He's
it's
not
based
dunking over.
on
Right.
it's
He's not
based on motion. I mean,
right.
I would like to put a pedometer on him and see how many miles he runs. I mean,
Right, but
does he ever stop
right. But that's more
except
about
to shoot?
endurance. Right. That's more about endurance than speed. I mean, you can run like that as long as your knees hold up, basically. And he's had lots of ankle injuries and even some foot injuries, but he's never had any knee injuries, right? His knees are sound. So he won't he'll be able to play the way he plays almost as long as he wants to some extent, right? Because it's about endurance. He just has to stay in shape. He's not like I say, he's not jumping over people. He's not dunking. He's not up playing in the post, slamming against Nate Thurmond and slamming against, Daryl Axe Imhoff. I mean, he's not, you know what I mean? There's not a lot of physical pounding in his way he plays because he's not a run and jump guy. He's not a guy that's, going 3.5, 4 feet in the air and coming down, right? He's a guy that plays the game below the rim, James. So as long as his knees hold up, and he's never had a serious knee injury ever, he has a good shot to play for a good long time. Could he play 4 or 5 more years? Sure. I mean, his game is more like Steve Nash's than it is like Iverson's or something like that. He's not in the air a lot. He's not bouncing off people a lot.
So, would you say that he's the best modern day point guard?
Well, that's an interesting question because is he really a point guard?
Well,
and this is where it gets interesting. I know they call him a point guard.
That's why I had quotation marks around modern day or modern decade, because that position hasn't evolved. There's no longer an Isaiah Thomas or
Sure.
guys that actually play point guard. You know, but in the modern decade, we have seen these guys drafted over and over.
Yep.
Of course, Steph is. I mean, he's probably uh, not the average mold. I mean, Steph is what 6'2", 6'3", maybe 185 pounds.
Yeah, he's put on some muscles. He's probably closer to probably in the low 190s, and he. He's listed at 6'3", but at the NBA combine, without shoes on, he was 6'1" and 7/8. With shoes on, 6'2" and a half, or 6'2" and a quarter, or something like that. So, his game is built around skill as opposed to he doesn't physically impose his game on people, right? As I said, he's not, flushing on people. He's not, running through or bumping off people. That's not his game. He's a finesse player, right? I mean, I think that's okay to say. And when you're a finesse player, which is exactly what he is, at the combine, he was 181 pounds. He's put on like 11 pounds of muscle or so since then. And though he doesn't look muscular, but if you really look at him and what he looked like when he first came into the league, you can see in his chest and shoulders and a little bit in his thighs, that he's a little thicker than he was.
Well, he's got his man strength now. When he came into the NBA, he was, I mean, he looked like, a little kid, like, a 7th or 8th grader when he, it was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah, he like I said, he was never a superimposing physical specimen, and he never will be. And it's not about that. So I remember there were times, going back to the Lakers, Gail Goodrich was officially the point guard, but there was lots of times when Jerry West, brought the ball up and would set up Goodrich for like a corner jumper, right? I mean, the roles, even as early as then, were beginning to blur between point guard and shooting guard. Goodrich was a point guard in college a point guard who could really shoot, right? Like Mark Price.
Well, that I think is when we started assigning them numbers. You're a 1, a 2, a 3.
Well, I mean, the numbers literally go back to the earliest days of the game, 1905 or whatever. They would have numbers even then, but the difference is that people began using non-coaches began using the parlance of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as opposed to in the teens and 20s when it's only the coaches that would use those terms. But the term lead guard, which I heard being bounced around when guys like Kevin Johnson and guys like Isaiah and guys like that were sort of sometimes they would be the leading scorer on the team, even though they were the quote unquote point guard. And so I remember hearing the word lead guard. And of course, Iverson, you know, there were games when Iverson might only have, 3 or 4 assists in a game, but he might put up 27 shots. So the term point guard no longer means what it used to mean. It doesn't mean Bob Cousy or Magic Johnson anymore. And as I said, in the way that Steph plays, he really resembles, Jerry West way more than he resembles a traditional point guard, who is a guy that brings it up and, passes it and then runs to the corner and then catches it and then makes a post entry pass and then runs back out to the top of the key and then, calls for it. If the guy who got the post entry pass can't get a good shot, then he, creates a shot for the wing. I mean, that it used to be that being a point guard was a very sort of, here's what you do. You do this, then you do that, then you do that. Then if all else fails, then they kick it back out to you for a shot. If everything else fails, right? That's what you were not the last option, but you were pretty far down the list at one point.
But you were there for your ability to handle the ball and for assists.
Yep.
That was your point. That's what you were a point guard. You had another guy, like you said, you pass the ball off to him, the shooting guard. If he can't get it into the post, then you pass it back out. But then, of course, that part has changed because we have no true centers either. But that's another conversation.
Yep.
I saw this on Facebook, and I thought it was very interesting. Their top 5 of modern times was LeBron first, Michael second, Kobe third, Larry Bird fourth, and finally Shaq number 5. Now,
so this is somebody who's only talking about the last 40 years. Is that what this is?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
A little younger than we are, so he, is of course of actually the LeBron era, I would say. Probably saw a little bit of Kobe, Bird, and Michael. I'm sure he watched film, but
obviously never saw Wilt, never saw Jerry West. Right, I got it.
No. So he said, this the person that put this up, that he would replace Steph. He would put Steph in and take Michael Jeffrey Jordan out. Okay. So
that shows you how little defense matters nowadays. Yeah.
Now, like you said, now out of this list, I would replace Bird with Steph. And it's not.
I would replace Bird with Jerry West, but I got you.
Yeah. I mean, but of this particular list, and of course, my only problem with LeBron is that interstate rivalry. I realize how great a basketball player he is, but it's almost hard for me to put, not to replace him with LeBron because LeBron is what, 4-6 in finals?
Yeah, that's correct.
So but what's your thoughts? Would Steph make your list? And if he does,
Steph makes my list. We're getting it out to like 10, 11, 12. But we're trying to keep it to 5. The 5 greatest in the history of the game? No. And I love Steph. I love Steph's game in Davidson. I was a person that was defending Wardell, Stephen Curry Jr. to many people, because including Doug, what's his name? Gottlieb, right? I got into it a little bit on Twitter with Doug Gottlieb over Steph. And I was like, Doug, if anybody should be pulling for Steph, it's you. He's a better version of you, I think I might have said to him at some point. I don't know if that was the best way to approach Mr. Gottlieb, but The point is that
But you were right though, and now I mean, there have been a couple occasions where Doug has said it on the air himself.
yeah, he's come around on Steph. I thought it was weird for him to be down on Steph of all people. Like, dude, this is the perfect version of Doug Gottlieb, a guy who's like I said, if someone took all the things that you did and just did them 1,000 times better. But as much as I love Steph, Steph is still essentially a one-way player. I mean, he gives you. Let me rephrase that. Like Bird, he gets in the passing lane. He gets a good number of steals. He has quick hands and he reads the passing lanes well, but he's not a good on-ball defender, and
No,
he
but
knows that about himself.
he did lead the league in steals. What, 2 years in a row?
Right, he's led the league in steals a couple times, which some people think is a junk stat. I look at it as almost like interceptions in football. I mean, Trevon Diggs is not a great corner, but he gets you a lot of interceptions. So you find a way to live with those extra chances to score. So that's what Steph gives you. And I just can't put him in over Michael Jeffrey Jordan because Jordan was an elite level player on both ends of the court. He was a top 5 in the history of basketball player on both ends of the court. Steph is not even a top 100, not even a top 200, not a top 300, not a top 4. He may be in the top 1,000, maybe, on the other end of the court. But he's not in the top several hundred on the defensive end, right? And so I can't put you in the top 5 if you're not in the top 500 on one end of the court. Basketball is still played on two ends of the court, the last I checked. And that's why I'll never have Harden in my top 5. And maybe not even my top 10, because once again, he only plays really on one end of the court. If you're not a top 300 player on the other end of the court, you can't be in my top 5. It's not football. You don't get to specialize. I mean, I'm just sorry. I mean, because Tom Brady would suck on defense. Let's be honest. Like, if he had to go out and play a little safety, he'd be screwed. So he's lucky he plays a sport where he can specialize. But you can't do that in basketball. You can't just sub out when the other team has the ball. So I'm sorry. I can't put Steph or Harden or guys like that on my top 5 or even my top 10, really. My top 5 and even my top 10 are guys that play at a high level at both ends of the court. So Scotty's in my top 10. He's not my top 5. Guys like David Robinson were great on both ends of the court. Guys like Hakeem were great on both ends of the court. Tim Duncan was great on both ends of the court. Those guys are my top. Guys like that are my top 10. Wilt was a great offensive and maybe it's the greatest offensive player and great on defense as well. Kareem was great on both ends of the court. Obviously Jordan was elite on both ends of the court. LeBron was an okay defender early in his career and became a very good defender and was always a great offensive player. So I can put him in my top 5. Bird, before his back injury, was an okay defender and then became a not very good defender later in his career, just partially because he couldn't really move. And even when he was, even in his physical peak, he wasn't really a great defender. But I can still put him in my top. He's not my top 5. He's in my top 10. And he's in the top part of my top 10. Like, he just missed my top 5. But the guys that are in my top 5 are all guys that were elite at both ends of the court. Jerry West is a great defender and a great offensive.
You put Shaq in your top 5?
No, Shaq's not in my top 5 because Wilt is. Wilt was a better defender than Shaq. And Shaq was a really good defender, but not as good as Wilt.
Well, of course not. I mean, of course, I'm from that era, and I used to love Will, but I knew that if that other guy named Bill Russell was on the other side of the court,
William Felton Russell, that's a guy that I tried to find room for him in my 5, and once again, it's because. And he wasn't a bad offensive player. I want to make clear he's one, but he wasn't an elite offensive player, right? No. He was a good but not great offensive player. He was a great. I mean, he's my top 5. You're talking about defense, right? Glove Payton, Scotty, Mike, right? Those guys are in my top. So that's something about Magic, right? Magic was not a great defender. He was a good defender, but he wasn't a great defender. And so guys like Magic and Bird, to me, take a slight step back to a guy like Jerry West because West was a great on-ball defender as well as being a great offensive player. So if I've got to put together 5, and it's a sport where you've got to play both ends of the, both offense and defense, then the guys who are slightly less effective as defenders get pushed out of my top five. As much as I loved watching Larry Legend, Larry Joe Bird, even before the back injury, was not great on defense. And then after the back injury, he was essentially a liability on defense.
No, I remember, watching some of those Celtic games where Bird could hardly move.
Right.
And couldn't sometimes couldn't even get off his chair. But also the last time we talked, as I said, it was tied up at 2-2. But game three, Al Horford uh, had probably the best game of his career.
Life of his life, yes.
And at that particular time, the question was, if the Celtics win the championship, would Al Horford be in the Hall of Fame?
Well, that's an
So,
odd question to me. I mean,
so
I know
now that
people like to be prisoners of the moment, but geez,
well,
Al Horford's a good player. He should be in the Hall of Pretty Good. That's what he is. He's in the Hall of Pretty Good. But I mean, if Udonis Haslem goes off for one game, we're putting him in the Hall of Fame. Like, what are we doing here? Is that what we come to, James? Are we just putting good players in because they had one really good game in a key game?
well, remember
I mean,
after
Robert
after
Horry had a
game.
bunch of big games in key moments. Are we putting Horry in the Hall of Fame?
Now that would be a good question. Are we putting on, But if you remember, after game three, it was well, they're just going to go back and like just bury the Warriors, and Tatum is going to continue. I think that might have been his highest scoring game, and he never scored. He hadn't scored 30 points after that.
Yep.
Al Horford hasn't. Has he? I don't even know if he's been in double digits
Well, I
since
mean,
that.
we knew that wasn't sustainable, right? I've watched his career. I mean, I became aware of him when he was, I think, 16 years old. It's like, oh, Teeter Horford has a kid that plays basketball. And I was watching, I was like, okay, he's not as tall as his dad. His dad was 7 feet. But his dad grew up in Jamaica. And so his dad hadn't played against a high level of competition until he came to the US. And it took him a while to adjust, and he never quite became quite what people were expecting him to be. He was this big, terrific body. I mean, he looked great, and he could run and jump and, dunk and block shots, but he never put together much of an offensive game. His son is about 3.5 inches shorter, but more skilled. But I watched his time at Florida, when he and what's his name? Noah and the white kid who got drafted and didn't do anything in the NBA. What was that kid's name? He was like a small forward, sort of a wing player. I can't remember his name now.
Yeah,
They
I
had three players who got drafted fairly early off that team, and Horford's the last one left. Right, he's the only one left of all those Florida kids that got drafted off that team. But he's had a nice career, and he's a good player. But the fact that people are even bringing up Hall of Fame lets you know, like I said, prisoner of the moment stuff. Tatum is a guy who's potentially great. He's still a young player. I hope he learns from this. As much as I dislike the Celtics, the game is more interesting. I'll admit it. The league is more interesting when the Celtics do not stink. And so I don't mind them being just good enough to lose in the finals. That's fine. In fact, that's perfect for me. I'm fine with them being just good enough to lose in the finals. That's actually what I if the Celtics could lose every year in the finals, I would be fine with that, to whoever is in the finals against them. But they do have a young nucleus of talent that should allow them to stay competitive for several years to come. Jaylen Brown is a flat out killer at times, and Smart. What an ironic last name. When he is indeed smart, that's a dangerous team. But he isn't always so smart, James.
but as an officer and somebody that has evaluated men before,
Yep.
I looked at Tatum kind of like from an NCO point of view,
Sure.
where like at this particular point, I'm not sure that I would put him in somebody else's foxhole,
Huh.
but I would have to keep him close to me in order to protect those that are under me. And hopefully he doesn't get both of us killed. When I look at Tatum, I see a guy 13 points in the last game. What 2 point? Did he score any in the second half?
Yeah. I mean, he,
I,
he
I see a young man, who's kind of shell shocked, for use of a better word, and I'm hoping psychologically that he can be a number one, because right now, after this series, I know the coach told him to go take a vacation, but right now he's a good three, not a one.
Yep. So I'll go back to what things I noticed about him, even going back to his days at Duke. I'm not Duke. I mean, no, that it. Wait, not Duke. Yeah, I was right. Duke. Right, Duke. That's right. Yeah, Duke. So, he measured in shoes at 6'8" and a quarter. Without shoes, something like 6'7" and a half, and was 204 at the time. He's put on about 20 pounds of muscle. He was a good shooter always, right? Even as a very young guy, he's got a 6'11" um, wingspan. He's a good ball handler. He's still just 24 years of age.
Yeah,
So there's a lot that's still going to happen for this guy. Like, he's just beginning to become what he's going to be. He got ahead of himself, I think, in some of the things that his mouth, as the old saying goes, wrote some checks. His game can't quite cash yet, but he has a chance to be a great, 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 great player. I remember when the comp I put on him coming out was Sean Elliott. That's the player that he most reminded me of coming out. And I may have undersold it slightly. He could end up being better. He probably will end up being better than Sean Elliott. It was a good player. But, you know, Grant Hill, is another guy that I heard him compared to coming out, partially could do the Duke thing at height, about, roughly the same size. But he needs to grow, not just physically. He's grown some, filled out physically, but he also needs to grow the mental side of his game. He keeps inviting the Mamba thing, and if you're going to bring up Kobe Bean Bryant, you have to be mentally bulletproof, and he's not. Right? We saw that. We saw that he's just not mentally bulletproof.
right.
The two parts of his game that aren't there yet. One is the decision making piece, right? Like so many other players on that team, that so all of a sudden, when everything ratchets up and the lights burn brighter and there's more, um, everything matters more and everything tightens up. You saw some very poor decision making. More turnovers than the Pillsbury Bake Off, and you saw guys take the wrong shot at the wrong time. You saw guys forcing things. You saw, everything that you don't want as a coach, right? You want guys to take a deep breath and slow the game down. Instead, they're trying to go faster. You don't want to run with Golden State anyway. Your best shot, at least you want to run at certain opportunities, but for the most part, you want to turn this. You want to slow the game down. If it's talking to me, if I'm putting the game plan together, I'm thinking you want to slow this team down. Our best shot is probably to turn this into a half court game. And if they get out on the break and start taking those, transition threes, and they start knocking those things down, we can start warming up our showers now so they're nice and hot, because you don't beat Golden State when they're hitting those transition threes. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the 93 Bulls. Like, you're not beating those guys if they're hitting transition threes. You can't run with Golden State. That's just not – I don't know how to say to that. Like, that's not the – no. That's a no.
No,
That's just not the way to do this.
Yeah. No, in the old days, you send a couple goons. You got those three guys, those those
Right,
15
right,
fouls at the end of the
right.
bench that you're going
Jim
to give.
Luskatoff, right? Larry Siegfried, Clyde
It's-
Lovella. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Kermit
it's-
Washington. Yeah, I know who you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, hey, that was like I said, before that was my role, on the basketball team. I'm not going to shoot or, I'm going to defend. I'm going to get in front of them, and if you get hot, I'm going to foul you.
yep,
That's my job.
yep.
My job is to get my 5 fouls. That's it. You know, but it is kind of like I said, it'll be interesting to me to see how this 24-year-old reacts, and I hope he does come back.
Yeah. I
But
mean, I, like I said, think of where even LeBron was at 24, right? I mean, there's a lot that's still Jordan at 24, right? He hadn't sniffed the finals at 24. I mean, a lot is still ahead of him. The 87 Bulls, were not a killing machine yet, right? I mean, it took a while for them to get there. So I'm willing to be patient and see what he becomes.
But like you said, though, basketball is always more exciting in the East when the Celtics are in the mix, even
Yeah.
if they're the team that you love to hate. But let's talk about the Nets here for a moment. There's been conflicting stories going around about, some say that the relationship between Kevin and Kyrie has soured. Some have say, then Kyrie puts out a list of 6 teams that he'd like to go to. And strangely enough, he has the Lakers on there and he has the 76ers on there. Now, he's never meshed with James Harden when they were all together on the Nets. LeBron, and the Lakers, I can see. I mean, that was, it is an older LeBron, but I still think a lot of the decision making also depends on AD. But what are your thoughts? Are we going to see Kyrie as a net, or is Kyrie going to be on one of those 6 teams that he said that he might like to go to?
I mean, can I go with C? None of the above? Probably not. I mean, obviously, I've made my feelings known on multiple occasions about Kyrie Irving, and he is a rare talent. I don't know why he doesn't get more assists, frankly, for a guy with that kind of ball handling skill and court vision. But I guess leave that as it lay. But he's got talent that is rare, but he's also got oddities that are rare, I think would be a good way to put it. And as a Lakers fan, while it would be great drama to add Kyrie to the mix, would it be great basketball to add Kyrie to the mix? I'm not so sure, James. I'm frankly not so sure. I know that adding more back half of the career superstars is apparently what the Lakers are into now. That's their thing. I want this team to go younger. Maybe it's just me. I'm crazy like that. I think older isn't maybe the solution. Adding another guy who's got 4 or 5, maybe more good years. I mean, Kyrie's not old. Let me not go crazy. Kyrie's still a relatively young player, I guess. But compared to the other guys on this team, he's a very young player. I guess we're talking about the Lakers. But I really want them to rebuild in a different kind of way, I guess is what I'm driving at. I would really like to see them get demonstrably younger at a bunch of key positions. And yeah, I mean, Kyrie is just barely 30, right? He just made 30 a few months ago. So he's for the Lakers, that's a baby practically. So I guess I shouldn't be whining about his age, but I would like to see them maybe add a player who's not 30, right? I mean, you're allowed to have players. Apparently, I just watched the draft who are 19. Wow, who knew? So I would really like this team to get rid of some of the older players if they're able to get rid of some of them, and then bring in some guys who are 20 something. I mean,
Well,
just to spice it up, James.
well, is it Poole is one of the players on the Warriors that's not old to drink. There's another. Who's the other 20-year-old on? I mean, excuse me, on the Golden State Warriors?
Well, I mean, Andrew Wiggins is just a baby. Were he and Tatum in the same draft? Hold on, let me think. But Wiggins is he can't be more than 25, I don't think. But Wiggins is young. I mean,
No, but I know, when you were talking about the age, like 19 and 20. Like I said, I know that there were two warriors, and I'm pretty sure Poole was one of them, that's not turned 21 yet. But there's another one too. I forget. May have been drafted last year by the Warriors, but the Hornets, we talked about Mike last week.
Yep.
And the Hornets are now entering the draft without a head coach. Do you think that D'Antoni is going to accept Mike's apologies and say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take the job? I mean, it, it, many of us thought that it was kind of D'Antonio's job to lose.
Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, I don't know if that's. I don't dislike Mike D'Antoni. In fact, I would like to see a team like the Lakers use him as a consultant. I don't think he's an elite level head coach. I think he's a good head coach, but I think he's an elite level offensive consultant. I think that he has a chance to be a great, I think what he does really well is help, particularly point guards. I think he's really good at helping to develop point guards, guide point guards. I don't love him as a head coach though, and I've been fairly clear about that. And if he ends up taking the job, which I mean, who knows? Whatever. It might work. It might. I mean, I might end up being made to look foolish. He might end up being great. He might be coach of the year next year, for all I know. But he wouldn't be my first choice. I'll put it that way. He wouldn't be my first choice. And yes, I know Kenny Atkinson, said yes and then said no. He pulled a Josh McDaniels, a Bill Belichick, kind of, one of those, one of those, one of those things that we used to do where you're like, I get that. I do. I get that. I understand that, and that's hurtful. I get that. But that was the guy they really, really wanted, and I think he would have been fantastic, quite frankly. He still feels like the right choice for the job to me, but obviously you can't force someone to take the job. You can't make them. You can't say, I'm not letting you leave until you agree to take this job. Though I bet Michael wishes he could do that. I'll play you for it. One of those kind of deals, maybe, first to 21. If I win, you take the job. But yeah, this is a franchise with some interesting dynamics, as we've probably delved into previously. Michael Jeffrey Jordan is, as we've talked about before, a compete-aholic, right? And frankly, he should be relaxing somewhere, but he can't because he has a sickness, James. He has a sickness, and he needs the juice. He needs the action, right? He can't just go someplace quietly and, watch his stock portfolio or whatever it is that super rich people do when they don't need to work anymore. He can't do that because he has a sickness. He needs the juice. He needs the action. He needs the competition. And he wasn't this, he would be in NASCAR. In fact, I think he does have an investment in a NASCAR team too.
I think he does.
It would be something, right? He needs it. He can't stop. He has a sickness. So, and he can't trust other people to do their jobs fully, right? He's made the right noises about butting out, right? But he's never quite butted out. You know it. I know it. We know it. Deep down inside, Michael Jeffrey Jordan knows it. That butting out isn't really his thing either. He's always going to want to, if it's basketball related, he's going to stick his nose in because he's Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And I understand that. Like, I get that. I'm not mad at him about thinking he should be more involved than he probably should be. But there comes a point eventually, James, where you should realize if you keep doing something over and over again, you keep touching the stove and it burns you every time. Eventually you stop touching the stove, right? I'm hoping that
or that's the what is that? The definition of insanity?
Yep. That's one of the many definitions of insanity, right? That if you do the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. At some point, he has to say to himself, I am not good at this particular thing, right? I'm good at a lot of things. I'm great at some things even, but I'm not good at this. and I need to back away and just be an absentee owner and write checks and leave everything else alone. He struggles, not surprisingly, James, with that aspect of the job of being an owner. The not doing things part is what's giving him trouble. And unless and until he gets to the not doing stuff part, his team is always going to suffer as a result. So he has to remove himself, or someone has to remove him, one or the other, from being so involved in so many parts of the basketball operation. He and Jerry Jones have some things in common.
Yes.
Right? But both were athletes at a high level. I mean, Jerry was on a team that some people think was, obviously in those days it was by polling, but some people said was the best team in the country, right? They had an undefeated season one year that he was there at Arkansas under Frank Broyles. Could he have played professionally? Maybe, but he went into the oil business and, obviously made the right decision there. But he's only got needs the juice, needs the action. He's 70, almost 80. He's almost 80 years old, 78, something like that. He should be not involved in the day-to-day operations of running a football franchise. Like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Mike's not quite that old, obviously, but he also needs to go someplace. And that someplace is not the front office, not practice, not the training room, none of that. He should occasionally have a press conference, show up when contracts are signed, first game of the season, press the flesh and whatever. But he needs to say to himself, I don't need to be involved in day-to-day decision making. And unless and until he does that, this team is going to be a bottom dweller, James.
Speaking of bottom dwellers, Mike Brown has taken the Kings head coaching job. The Kings haven't made the playoffs in 16 seasons, I believe. So how long before, well, before they become a contender or Brown gets fired?
Well, I mean, I'm almost going to say define contender. I think they're a playoff team in 2 seasons. I think in 2 seasons, not next year, but the year after next, they could be a playoff team. It's not impossible. I think Mike Brown's a really good coach, first of all. I believe in Mike Brown. And I think if they draft well, and they've had some good drafts recently, right? I think Kerryon Fox is a fun player. They have some fun players on their roster, some good, interesting players on their roster. The issue is they're in the West.
And right. Precisely. That is the issue.
That is the issue. I am very much aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers, the Warriors. You can throw a few more in there. I mean, so while the Kings are getting better, some of those other teams are getting better. I mean, I think Portland will be better next year.
Yep.
I'm not sure about the Pelicans, but that depends
Pelicans,
on Zion.
No. The Jazz will be better.
Yeah, the Jazz will be better. Denver, maybe.
Denver, maybe.
Yeah. So I mean,
I think the Suns will take a little bit of a step back. I don't think they're going to, have that kind of year again. So many things have to go right, but they'll still be a really good team. Yeah,
like you said, it depends upon what you mean by contenders. I mean, right. Are they going to go? Are they all of a sudden going to have 30 wins? 40 wins? That's the question. Like you said, they're in a loaded West. So it's kind of like
they could be a 32-win team this year, a 41 team win next year, and by 2025 be a 50 win team. I think that's completely possible. So that should be enough to save Mike Brown's job, because he's taking over a team that you and I both know was one of the worst teams in basketball. But I think he's going to be the right guy to get them. It might be almost like a Mark Jackson thing, right? Where you're the right guy to get this team to being respectable. And then do they move on from you eventually to someone who's seen as an elite level coach. I don't know, but I think he has success. I think they add, 7 to 9 wins each of the next couple of years.
Well, I mean, like I said, it should be very interesting to see, how long a leash or short of a leash they give Mike Brown in this new job. Unlike Atkinson, he's going to stay. He's going to be the coach. I don't think he's going
Yes.
to back down. So
No, he's there. He's playing to take the job.
yeah. We had talked about this before when we were talking about the Pistons, but I'm sure we'll talk more about it next week when Demetrius is back.
Yep.
But last minute, Jreami Grant goes to the
Yeah.
Trailblazers for, I believe it's a future, a 2025 first round draft.
Yep.
What do you think? Did the Trailblazers improve? I mean, how many more years are you going to have with Damian Lillard? You do have one young. What's the young guard that's there now? Took CJ's place.
Yeah. Well, okay. So to the first question. The first question first. I know people have decided not to believe Damian when he says he plans to retire with the Trailblazers. Whether it makes sense or not, I think that's his plan. Now, it may not work out, but I think that as of now, he's committed to being there. And I know, the basketball world, partially I think because they don't want to believe it, they want to see him play someplace else, has decided to ignore the fact that he has consistently said he plans to retire a Trailblazer. Once again, Lakers fans, have lusted after him at various points in his career, but not just, lots of teams have lusted after him. But I think he wants to try to win one in Portland. And God bless him. I mean, it's a really courageous thing to decide you want. As was mentioned, I mean, the phrase that we used previously was, you're in the West. And I mean, if they were in the East, we'd be having a whole different discussion. But they are not. They are in the West. And as you mentioned, the Suns,
the Clippers,
the Nuggets, assuming the Lakers get it together, they could be back in the mix. But even if they don't, let's assume the Lakers continue to flounder around. There's still some really good teams out west. The Jazz are going to be – there's so many good teams. So is it possible that they make a deal that brings them another superstar, right? Because that's been the thing. Can they find a Robin to Dame's Batman, right? And CJ McCollum was a good player, but he wasn't quite Robin. Can they find him his Pippen? Can they find him his Draymond? Can they find him his James Worthy? Can they find him his when you think about those sort of great teams in the past, his Kevin McHale, his that great second option, that great second player, not just a good player, not just a glue guy, my little term that I love to whip out, but not just a guy that's in the mix and plays hard and can occasionally give you 16 points. But a guy who's a legit superstar, potentially, or at least a star who can occasionally play like a superstar. Who is that guy going to be? Because it doesn't look like he's on their roster at the moment. And, we'll see what the draft brings and things like that. But the Trailblazers have a solid, decent roster. Their roster isn't bad, James, but they're missing that other guy, right? Yeah. They're missing the other guy.
The roster's not bad, but they're playing in the West.
Right, that's the real issue. That's the real issue, right? That's what it is. I like some of their pieces. I like Keon Johnson. Ben McLemore's an interesting player. Justice Winslow's interesting, but they're all. I mean, I'm still talking about glue guys. That's the whole thing. Is that all these guys are guys that are, they're fun to watch and they play hard and they're. But not all the single. I mean, we're not talking about guys that are. The other team isn't game planning for Ben McLemore though. The other team isn't worried about Justice Winslow. They're worried about Dame. They're worried about Damian Lillard, and everyone else is. I mean, Eric Bledsoe's a solid player, but Chris Dunn. I mean, they have a lot of Josh Hart, Joe Ingles.
Yeah, they have a lot of good pieces.
Good pieces.
They just play in the West.
They play in the West. Anthony Simmons is fun to watch, but I mean, not a single of these guys is a guy's like, oh God, how do we stop him? Except, of course, Damian Lillard.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of work to do, quite frankly, James. A lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. I mean, the second best, talent-wise, the second best player on this team, unfortunately, is coaching. His name is Chauncey Billups. If only Chauncey could, tap himself into some games, or I mean, that would help if Chauncey, could somehow give him a few minutes. Maybe not, 20 minutes. Maybe even just 8 to 12 a night as a player coach or something. But I mean, literally, he's the second most talented dude on the team.
Yeah, he is, and I love Chauncey too. Bill, I was hoping I could grab Mike here, but because I know you guys follow these guys all the way from Pop Warner, but things have kind of changed since my generation. And who's the real wide receiver you now? Florida, LSU, Miami, Michigan, or the Ohio State?
Well, I mean, most recently, obviously the Ohio State has a really good claim to it. LSU is right there. Like it's if you're talking recently, remember at one point when it was Tennessee? Remember those days? Now, I mean, someone below a certain age would stare at you like you had a horn growing out of the middle of your forehead. If you've been to Tennessee as a wide receiver U candidate, you have to go back to like the Stanley Morgan to Peerless Price days. But
well, they had some good wide receivers in Texas
Nash.
also.
I mean, they had a bunch of Marcus Nash and Joey. I can't remember Joey kid's last name, but they had a bunch of good wide receivers back in the day. Galt. I mean, yes, they used to be an absolute. Oh, there we go. They used to be an absolute killing machine, in terms of putting out great receivers. But those days have come and gone, and they are very much gone recently. But Velus Jones is the first Tennessee receiver drafted in a while, I believe. But the fact of the matter is, at this point, the way this team is currently constructed, I mean, the way this question is currently constructed, if we're talking about the last, from 2000 onward, basically, the U has dropped down to producing, I mean, their last great receiver, right? I mean, Santana Moss was good. Andre Johnson was great. That's it, right? They've had some good. I mean, Reggie Wayne's back in the day. I mean, these are guys from a little ways back. These guys are all retired now, James. So the best Miami receiver who's in the league now is what? Hearns? Is Alan Hearns still playing? I mean, think about this. Charleston Rambo just got drafted. I mean, they're not a factory when it comes to receivers anymore. Who else is really in the USC still does a good job putting out receivers.
They've been really hot.
There we go. Oklahoma's put out some decent ones, but to me the real race, if you're talking about the last 20 years, it's between Ohio State and I just said
USC.
Yeah. And USC's in there, but it was Ohio State and
right now
LSU and LSU the last 20 years. Yeah.
Mike, I was asking the question, who's the real wide receiver university now? And the schools I named, of course, were LSU, Michigan, Ohio State, and who are the other two? Let's see, Florida. And let's
Florida's receiver track
Florida
record in
LSU.
the NFL is not the greatest. I don't know if they're in the fight.
Yeah, and I think also it depends. Are you talking about as far as elite athletes or like production wise, as far as like 3 or 4 wide receivers go, 2 or 3 wide receivers go out of the same school?
Well, I mean, we do right now. We know what is it? LSU, as far as numbers, has what 12. I think Ohio State has 11 or 10. But also, when you look at recruiting, Ohio State's recruiting wide receiver class is definitely in the top 10 this year. I
Yep.
think they got number 5 and 53 and somebody else. But
Alabama too. Alabama's been real hot with wide receivers.
Yep.
yeah. Well, I'm asking you guys because I know you guys trace them from like I said, Pop Warner and
Yep.
Dynasty and that. So which ones? Maybe I should have said the most productive wide receivers.
I think LSU's close, and then Alabama in the last few years. I mean, they had Henry Ruggs come out, which was not a very good thing. But outside of that, they've been pretty good as far as production. I think LSU has had the best wide receivers quality as far as talent wise come out.
All right, guys. Well, let's get right into it. Of course, both of you are old enough to remember the Goose.
Oh yeah.
Thoughts, memories. Mike, you want to talk about the Goose first?
Sure, I'd love to. He was one of my favorite players. He 94, 95 season, the Colts miraculously go to the AFC Championship game after being, I think, 9-7 that year, and having to have
Captain comeback year, right?
Captain comeback, absolutely. Jim Harbaugh miraculously get in because they had to win the week 16 and they had to have like 4 teams lose, and all 4 teams lost. They get in, they go and play the Chargers on the road after losing to them in week 16 or week 15, excuse me, week 15, and getting demolished at home by the Chargers. And then they have to go on the road in wild card game against the same Chargers, and they just blow them out. Zach Crockett has like 165 yards or something that effect, scores 2 touchdowns, and they just blow them out. And they move on. They go play the Chiefs, who had the best record that year, and win 10-7 because Lynn Elliott can't make a field goal at home, misses like 4 field goals, and I can't remember the name of the kicker for the Colts off the top of my head. But anyways, he makes 1 of 4, and they win, and they go to the championship game. And Aaron Bailey, last pass of the game, Hail Mary pass from Jim Harbaugh from about 45 yards out, falls into Aaron Bailey's lap in the end zone to win the game. He rolls, the ball rolls out of his hands, and the Colts lose. But to say all of that, one of the huge reasons they got that far was because of Tony the Goose Siragusa. And I think he had like 90 tackles that year as a defensive tackle. Huge guy. Was so undrafted too. And just an amazing player. Went on to win a Super Bowl finally for the Ravens. But yeah, absolutely one of my favorite players of all time.
Bill, thoughts, memories of the Goose?
So I remember watching him at Pitt, right? He was obviously, you don't think about like him being a tremendous athlete, but he was a much better athlete, at least in short areas, than people gave him credit for being. A white Gilbert Brown, right? Basically, explosive in very short areas. He could move, 3 yards in each direction, as well as a guy who was 50, 60 pounds lighter, but powerful, obviously. But the thing I remember is this big giant personality. He had a huge personality.
Yeah,
right.
That really, yep.
A hilarious individual, a guy that was beloved by his teammates everywhere he played. Classic Jersey guy, right? I mean, I think he did a little bit of acting too, if memory serves me correctly. once again playing exactly what you would think he'd be playing. I think he played, muscle, a couple of people's, enforcer types a little bit, but a guy that truly enjoyed life, right? I mean, truly enjoyed life.
Great announcer too. Great
Yes,
announcer. Used to
right.
love his, Tony would get kind of down in the mud with you, and he'd tell you about how the other players, well, yeah, you got to watch some of the things he does down there in the trenches. Not that Tony was, a model citizen, but I mean,
Right.
you know, but yeah. Yeah, a great guy, tremendous personality. He's definitely going to be missed in the
Yeah.
football community.
I mean, it's been a tough week. A lot of friends who are Ravens fans. It's been a really tough week
Yeah.
for them. I
2 in
mean,
the same day. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
I can't
Uh,
remember the last time that's happened. I don't know if it's happened before even.
well, the only reason why I'm not mentioning Mr. Ferguson is because of there's still some doubt as to the cause of death. And I don't want to try to speculate that this happened or that happened. Some say it was, he over practiced, some say other things. So
Hmm.
rather than get into that, kind of speculation and
Well, we don't have to
to,
speculate. We can just say it's a tragedy that a young man has
oh,
passed.
yeah, yeah, it's a tragedy. The young man was, what, 26 years
26, I
old?
think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. So, yeah, it's part of, I guess, like you said, it's just a tragedy. There's no way to put fingers on what could have possibly happened. But hey, you guys, do you think Gronk's going to stay retired this time, Mike?
No. Well, I'll put a caveat on that. I think he stays retired if the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are fringe playoff team. But if they shoot out the gate and they look like they do the last few seasons, which I would not be surprised if they don't, especially since Tom Brady's still there. I think probably by week 7 or 8, he's going to be like chomping at the bit because he wants to come back, win another Super Bowl with Tom Brady. But yeah, that would be the only reason why I think he stays retired is because if they're just not doing well.
What do you think, Bill? Gronk that doesn't want to go. Just doesn't feel like going through that weight room thing, and all of that. It's like, hey, man, maybe in the middle of the season, it depended on it's a little cooler down here, and uh, I don't think it's certainly not because he has to learn the playbook all over. But what do you think, Bill?
Well, I think in his case, it mostly comes down to his body. And let's not forget that the first time he retired is because it hurt. He hurt all the time, and he's now in a situation where his body apparently has allowed him to come back and play. But it was, a respite. It was, I don't know if it's a permanent state of affairs. And I remember he'd invested in a CBD company. Was one of the things he invested in. Was sort of talking about a lot when he first retired. But once you hurt your back, I mean it doesn't ever really come back. Like your back it's a one-shot thing. Like once you've hurt your back is hurt. You're at no point do you say, oh wow, my back is now healed, I feel great again. It's a combination of pain management and finding things that help your back to feel better, but it never goes back to being what it was before you hurt it. That's the sad fact of back injuries. So if you have a bad back, you have a bad back, period. So that's the only thing I'll say. It comes down to how he feels. Do I think that he'll be tempted to come back? I'm with Mike. I think that especially if the team's doing well and he feels good, I'm sure he'll be tempted to. It just comes down to how he feels. I mean, if he once again stays away from the game and doesn't feel that itch again, because you never know when you stop feeling it, right? I mean, Sometimes for some guys, they never stop feeling it. Jerry Rice still thinks he can play. He's wrong, but you can't tell Jerry that. Jerry's convinced right now that if the right team called, that he could go out. Maybe he couldn't play quite at the level he used to be. He's convinced he could get you 6-7, maybe 6-7 possession. He couldn't get deep on you anymore, but he can get you like some 3rd and 6s. He's 100% convinced of it. So, but for other guys, as great as they are, they realize like I can't do this. I have to give so much to do this at the level I want to do this that I can't give that anymore. I'm out of that level of commitment. I'm used up to some extent. So we'll see how he feels. Give it a few months, see how he feels. But I think people are underselling, I think, how hard it is for him to get ready to play.
I'm sure both of you have watched Russell Gage throughout his career. What do you think? How do you think he's going to adapt to Tom? And do you think? I think maybe I've asked this before, but do you think that maybe he's going to be that Julian Edelman for Tom in that offense? What do you think, Bill?
Well, that's not the kind of player he is. He doesn't resemble Julian Edelman in literally any way. He's a 6'4" black man. That's one way that he's not like Edelman. But the main way that he's not like Edelman is, you hear a term used a lot, is how he wins, right? So Edelman, as we all know, was a former quarterback who made the conversion to receiver. And so his way of winning was to be able to think along with the quarterback at a super high level, even though he didn't always understand the finer points of playing receiver at first. He worked hard at it, was a really good special teams player and became a very good, dependable receiver. Gage is a big athlete who has, true ability to jump and snatch balls off of people's heads. He's not Randy Moss, don't get me wrong, but he's a big-bodied receiver with long arms and big hands and good leaping ability. So his way of winning is radically different from a guy like Julian Edelman's. A better comparison for him or a better idea of what you might be getting would be a guy like Michael Jenkins or Joe Juravicius or Ed McCaffrey. That kind of guy. Like, he's closer to those guys. He was like Julian Edelman.
What do you think, Mike? I'm looking at Godwin and Evans as the deep threats, especially Evans down around the goal line.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an appropriate place for Gage. He might have to alter his game, but when you're playing with a guy like Tom Brady, compared to what he's been with Matty Ice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, similar kind of quarterbacks, both drop back quarterbacks, but Gage, just to correct Bill, he's 6 feet. So
I thought he was a little taller than that. Okay,
that's okay. Just for the audience. With Gage, he is a very creative route runner. And if you watch his tape, he does a lot of things differently than normal wide receivers do. There are a few times where he just releasing off the line of scrimmage, he'll move his feet in different directions to try to create space and get separation from press defensive backs or man on man, just depending on what he's facing. He's also a go-getter. As we talk about football players, he has that dog in him. He's going to block very well. He's going to look for opportunities to block. And if he does engage, look out, because he's going to be, getting on you. Hands are okay. He could do really better, but I think he's a solid piece for this Buccaneers offense. As you mentioned, James, you have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and they had Rob Gronkowski, but those two are definitely the primary receivers on this team, and he adds a good solid third element.
I was thinking about Justin Gage, the 6'4" guy from Missouri. Okay.
Justin Gage. Okay. Yeah.
That's why I was okay. I pulled up the mental Rolodex, pulled up the wrong guy. Yeah.
I do that too all the time. Especially if they have the same last names.
Mike, NBA analyst James Jones compares Trey Lance to Mahomes and Rodgers as far as being a superstar, a future superstar. Really?
I mean, I don't know how far that could go, just because right now we don't even know. I mean, depends on what you, and I mean, people out there believe as far as the 49ers and why they haven't moved from Jimmy Garoppolo. Some of those speculations are the fact that Trey Lance isn't even ready. So if that's true, and Patrick Mahomes' first game ever was like 3 touchdowns, and the dude was ready as soon as Alex Smith relinquished the reins out of and put it in Patrick Mahomes' hands. So from one guy maybe not even being ready to a guy from the very start in an NFL active game is just dominating. I could see similarities. I mean, both are mobile. Trey Lance is more mobile than Patrick Mahomes. Both have very good strong arms. Probably Mahomes has a little bit stronger arm than Lance, but there are some similarities there. But I'm taking Patrick Mahomes any day of the week, and I'm not even going to compare it because I think that's just hype. That's propaganda to me.
Yeah. What do you think, Bill? That's kind of like Tyreek, talking about Patrick. Tua is more accurate than Mahomes. I mean, Patrick has had to listen to a lot of stuff this week. What's your thoughts on that, Bill? Comparing Trey Lance to possibly a Mahomes or a Rodgers in the future.
I mean, lots of things are possible in the future. That's what we love about the future, right? Because so many things are possible. And so I can't say what he's saying is impossible, but I'm going to say that those facts have not been entered into evidence, Your Honor. That's a lot. You're asking me to go a long way with you and not giving me enough to feel like I should be trying to go that far. That's a lot to ask. Here's what I will say. Okay, we've seen what Justin Herbert has done, right? But Justin Herbert was also terrific in college, and for a while was terrific in college. Lance is a guy that had a very sort of truncated collegiate career and did it, obviously, at a top level FCS program, but still an FCS program. So we're talking about a guy with a limited number of starts at an FCS program. Pat Mahomes was a 3-year starter, or almost 3 whole years, all of 2 years, and the better portion of the third season at Texas Tech. And I know people like to take shots at the Big 12, but it's still a high level of competition. And most of the time, his team was taking the field against teams that had more talent. Kansas being the great exception to that rule, but Iowa State, I guess, as well. But for the most part, when you're playing Oklahoma State, when you're playing Oklahoma, you're playing Texas, right? I think Texas A&M was still in the Big 12 in those days. Yeah, they were. You're playing Texas A&M. You're playing these teams that have more players, more talented players, more better players than your team. And the reason they hung around with these teams was Patrick LeVon Mahomes Jr. I mean, like that's it. That's the reason. That's the almost entirely the reason they were still very competitive was him. He is a rare talent, a once in a however many years talent, a couple of decades probably level of talent. And unless and until I see a lot more, and I mean a lot more, and I like Lance, I do, I like him, but you're asking a lot. I mean, that's a lot.
I mean, Patrick Mahomes could be the best or the greatest quarterback to ever play this game. And to measure up anybody to that is already asking a lot, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
Bill, did Jerry Jones just blatantly tell Sean, come on down, I got a place for you, come out of retirement. The Dallas Cowboys are yours.
Well, first of all, I still believe Peyton wants to try out that TV thing. I think he's heard it's a lot of sweet, easy money, and he's right. So he's going to want at least 1 year of not having to drink Maalox, 1 year of not having to get in the office at 5 and 4 o'clock in the morning, 1 year of not having to try to game plan against the best football minds in the world. So maybe when he comes back from his, paid vacation in the booth, maybe he'll be ready to listen to the sweet entreaties of one Jerry Jones. But, as a person who's basically keeping the chair warm, McCarthy does at least have a chance to maybe keep the job if they have a great season. So at least there's always that possibility, that chance that he gets to hold on to the job. But if they're 10-7, he might want to start refreshing that resume again, because I think 9-10 wins is not going to be enough. He's going to need to get into that 11-12 win area, not just win the NFC least, but win a couple of playoff games. Now, we're talking. But if it's a wild card or win the NFC least and then, one and done or something like that in the playoffs, yeah, Sean Payton's going to get a lot of late night text from that 214 area code.
What do you think, Mike? Like just a matter of time before McCarthy's out, especially with the improvements by the Eagles. But usually there's only one team from the least. What do you think here? Is Jerry trying to instill confidence in Mike McCarthy, or is this a serious like come on down, Sean?
I think that he would really like to have Sean Payton. I mean, Sean Payton was their quarterbacks coach before he went to New Orleans.
Yep.
And also, the Cowboys haven't been winning. I mean, I'm looking right now, and Barry Switzer, we all remember him taking over, and he went to 7 playoff games and won 5. Since Barry Switzer in 1997, you know how many games the Cowboys have won, playoff games the Cowboys have won?
Is it none?
Close.
Two.
Close.
Two, right?
Okay.
It's 3. 3 games.
Okay.
Barry Switzer won 5 since 1997. Chan Gailey, Dave Campo, Bill Parcells, Wade Phillips, Jason Garrett, Mike McCarthy have all totaled 3 playoff wins. So looking at Sean Payton's record in playoffs and those kind of things, yeah, absolutely. I think he would love to have Sean Payton back.
Yeah, and Jerry's not shy about asking.
No, he is not shy about that at all.
Nope.
So the state of the 2022 Packers, are Aaron and company, the Packers, contenders without Devontae Adams, Mike?
A big part of me wants to say no way. They cannot win with Devontae Adams because who do they really have to back up Devontae Adams? Allen Lazard. They have the rookie. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. Okay, so yeah, great. There's nobody there. There's no alpha at the wide receiver core right now. So as great as Aaron Rodgers is, and he's a Hall of Famer, who's he throwing to? Just a mediocre bunch of dudes. Devontae Adams, that's what made Devontae Adams so great with the Green Bay, is he transcended all that garbage. Well, now all you're left is garbage. So I'm like, okay, there's no way they can win without Devontae Adams. But these organizations, they have so much input and so much data and so much intel that I don't think they would just let Devontae Adams walk away if they didn't believe they had a chance to compete and be a playoff team. With that said, data and all analytics and all that stuff is great when it works, but is it going to work? I don't think so.
But Bill, talking about data, isn't this supposed to be the year of Jordan Love? 2-3 years and Aaron was out?
It might be the year Jordan Love gets traded, if that's what you mean. I mean, that's how he.
Yeah, might be.
That's his opportunity to have a year. Is if let's just say the Vikings get off to the Vikings. No, that's not the good example. Let's say the
Vikings would be a good example there. Detroit is not going to win that division. The Bears aren't going to win that division. So the only, I think, competition
I was thinking about trading partners. So let's just say, let's just say as an example, let's say that the Titans get off to a really hot start, right? The Titans are like,
I don't want that.
Right, but it's a hypothetical. You'll be okay.
Yeah, I know.
And let's say they're 7-1, right? And then Tannehill goes down, and they're not wild with their backup situation. They're going to make some calls. Jordan Love might be available. I mean, there's some guys who are going to be made available. Obviously, some people might be some, you up text to Ryan Fitzpatrick, that kind of stuff. But the fact is that Jordan Love is a young commodity that some people like, right? Teams do work, even teams that don't need a quarterback, do work on young quarterbacks during the pre-draft process for just this kind of emergency, for just this kind of situation. Because if something happens, they want to know what they think of this kid. If we ever need to make a deal down the road, we want to know what we think of this kid. And so if a contender all of a sudden, Baker Mayfield is obviously going to get calls as well. But if a contender all of a sudden, Garoppolo is also out there, or might be out there. But if there's a contender that suddenly needs to replace a starter at quarterback, he's going to be on that list. Now, he probably will be third on that list after the two I named earlier of being Garoppolo and Baker Mayfield. But there's only so many guys that people trust with their jobs, because that's what you're doing. When you bring in a quarterback to replace your starter during the season, you're betting your job on this guy, because if this guy stinks, you're probably getting fired.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. General manager is probably going to go. The coach is going to go. Everybody's going to go.
Kids have to make a whole bunch of brand new friends. The whole deal, yeah.
Everybody says that head coach Mike Rule with the Panthers has to make progress. Well, I mean,
Now, is Mike Rule related to Matt Rule?
Matt Rule. I'm sorry, I got Mike. Matt Rule. The question is, what is progress for the Panthers? Bill?
Is it after dark?
Yes, it's after dark.
If they can avoid stepping on their own dicks.
Damn.
Okay, so they've had some bad luck. Let's be honest. They've had some bad luck. It's not all Matt Rule. I like Matt Rule. I think he's struggling a little bit with making the transition between being a college coach to a head coach, and then NFL, which I think most of them struggle with. I mean, even Saban didn't exactly knock it out of the park, and everyone, people think he's the greatest college coach in the history of the game. So I can't be shocked that there's been some growing pains for him in terms of trying to make this transition between, being a college head coach and a very good young college head coach to being, a not so far not very good young pro coach. But it'll help him, one, if his best players stay healthy. That helps every coach, right? Every coach is a better coach if his best players stay healthy. He's going to have to make some adjustments in terms of what he likes to do. And frankly, those guys are going to have to execute at a higher level. They'll need better quarterback play than they've had. I don't know. Kerry Collins, I'm trying to remember the last time they had really good, consistent quarterback play in Carolina.
Good question.
Good luck. I might have to put that in next week's questions.
I mean, it's been a minute, right? I mean, I'm not going crazy here. I mean, it's been a while since they've had great quarterback play, right? So that's going to help him a lot if they can get really good, consistent quarterback play, because it's been a minute since they've been able to say, "Oh yeah, we're solid at the quarterback position here." Jake Delhomme, probably, I guess. I mean, yeah, right.
Oh, Cam Newton.
Cam. Sorry, Cam. So sorry, Cam. What am I saying? So yeah, right.
I forgot about him too.
Level for a short amount of time too. But so they've had, in the history of the franchise, they've had three solid starters, right? Three solid starters, and one who even played at an MVP level for a short period of time. Delhomme was above average. Collins was solid. That's three guys in the history of the franchise. The franchise is 28 years old now.
Started in 95 with Collins and Frank Reich at the helm.
So this is their 28th year of operation. Okay, so that's what. Yeah,
that's good math. I didn't have that in my head.
Okay, so I'm glad you had that. So yeah, so they're in their 28th season. So that's three good quarterbacks in 28 years. That's not really what you want. You would prefer to have more than that. And so having, 9 or 10, maybe 11 solid years of quarterback play in 28 years means that the other 17 or so you did not have good quarterback play. And that's not how you keep your job. So he needs a lot of his young players to develop. He needs quarterback play to be consistent. If not great, then at least good. And he needs his best players, and his best player is still Christian McCaffrey, to be healthy all season.
Right.
If all those things happen, yes, there'll be progress. Now, progress still means fighting to be around 500, most likely. But if those things don't happen, oof, it's going to be rough.
What do you think progress is for Matt Rule?
Well, shout out to my buddy Randy Fasani, who started one game for the Carolina Panthers.
There you go. I remember Randy Fasani. He was a big kid, like 231 pounds or something.
Yeah,
right?
He was big, athletic. We went into the police academy together, and part of the training testing was to jump over a 10-foot wall. Well, most people like jumped up on it and went over. He just like scaled it like it was a hurdle. He was incredibly athletic. But yeah, Matt Rule over the last 2 seasons, 10-23. And
ouch.
I think 500 maybe would be the mark we're looking for Matt Rule.
Okay.
Or 9-8. Yeah, let's go 9-8 because you can't be 500 anymore.
Yeah. More likely season for the Falcons, Mike. Mariota as a comeback player of the year, or Desmond Ridder being in the conversation of rookie of the year?
I don't think Mariota probably. There's too many players in my mind that would have more of an opportunity to win player of the year for. So with that said, I think Desmond Ridder has a shot if he can overcome Mariota. These two guys, it's going to be a camp battle, and I'm thinking they're going to lean towards the rookie unless he's just absolute, garbage. But I think Desmond Ridder starts the year, and with that has more of a shot to get rookie of the year than Mariota does comeback player of the year.
What are your thoughts there, Bill?
Yeah, I'm going to agree. Sorry to disappoint my friend Monty Perez, who is a huge Oregon fan. But, yeah, I'm going to agree. I don't think either of those two things are actually terribly likely. But if it's a sort of gun to my head, must choose, I would say the more likely outcome is Desmond Ridder being the – first of all, I think he starts probably right around half the games this season. Hopefully not due to injury.
I said being in the conversation. I didn't say necessarily he was going to win it. I just said being – in the conversation for rookie of the year.
So does that mean like top 8? If you mean like top 8, then I'm gonna. Well, either way, I'm leaning more Ridder anyway. So if you're loosening the constraints even more, then I'll lean even heavily more towards Ridder.
The Ratbirds' offense is designed for Lamar Jackson, not for the.
Brett Hundley,
not necessarily.
One of the other Hundleys.
Yeah. Do you think that this will help in his negotiations? But what does it say about his career longevity, Bill?
Well, he's been healthy for the most part, right? I mean, last year was the first year where he missed a game due to injury, if memory serves me correctly.
Right.
So I don't think longevity is really the issue. Though he runs a great deal, he runs smartly. He doesn't run like some of the less intelligent quarterbacks who, forget that they're quarterbacks. He, for the most part, knows when the journey is done and gets down without taking much punishment. So I'm not worried so much about that part of it. I think that his plan is to sort of follow the Joe Flacco model. I think he plans to ball out, win a Super Bowl, and then say, give me all the money. I mean, I think that's really what the plan is. I mean, that's one reason he doesn't have an agent. So he gets all of his money, right? He doesn't want to divide his money, share his money, any of that. He wants to get all of his money. And so the best way to do that, to get all of the money, is to have a great year, be a Super Bowl winner, Super Bowl MVP, the whole shebang and bang. I'm going to Disney World. Oh, and Ravens, I want to be the highest paid player in football. And Steve Bisciotti has already gone on record as saying I'm fine with making him the highest paid player in football. So at that point, that's what will happen, assuming it plays out that way. Now, it's a big gamble because when you're playing in your option year, if you do get hurt, now you damaged. I mean, Dak Prescott did it as well. It ended up not hurting him too badly, but you have at least to some extent possibly damaged your bargaining position.
Mike, what do you think?
I do agree with Bill that if he does get hurt, then it's not as bad as Cuba Gooding Jr. in the football movie, but where he won't get anything, but it will damage him a little bit. And I do agree that if he can transcend with what he has, and what he has is James Proche and Devin Duvernay and just yuck. Rashad Bateman is a solid wide receiver. We need to see a little bit more out of him, but we've seen some good things from him. But really, he's almost a rookie too, because he missed first 7 games of last year or something to that effect. So you're sort of still dealing with a young player out there, and they didn't really have much time together to develop. So if I'm Lamar Jackson and I can get this team to the playoffs with Devin Duvernay, James Proche, and Rashad Bateman, oh, damn right, give me some money. Hell yeah.
So I'm going to throw one last name at you. And obviously, Mike, it's a name you already know. Watch out for Tylan Wallace to end up with a better season than some people realize.
Yeah, he was a rookie last year, right? I think. Or the year before. I can't remember.
And he was mostly on special teams a little bit. He didn't. But when he got some snaps on offense, he looked really good. And Rashad Bateman's injury is one of the reasons he got some snaps on offense. He was really going to be just a special teamer last year. I like Proche a little more than you do, but he's a possession guy. He's not built to really stretch the field. Duvernay is essentially not a poor man's, destitute, homeless, a man who barrel, right? Remember you watch cartoons and a guy was wearing a barrel? So he's a guy wearing a barrel version of Deebo Samuels. He's a guy who can do a little bit of everything. He's get some snaps in the backfield in certain situations, run those sort of orbit sweeps that I like to do sometimes. But he just isn't very refined as a route runner. But he's a terrific athlete, 4.37, 40, 39.5-inch vert, physically strong. They're going to try to find some cheap ways, you know what I mean? Like cheap in terms of like easy ways to get him the ball in space. So even though he may not ever become a proper wide receiver, I could see him getting some sort of Cordero Patterson / Deebo Samuels kind of production out of him as well.
That makes sense. Sure.
Guys, can the Bengals get more out of Joe Mixon by putting him in the passing game a little more? Bill?
I mean, he's been in the passing game a fair amount. But could he have like an 800-yard receiving season? Is that what you're asking? Yes. I think he could. I think he could. To me, the upper limit on him, and you can correct me because you probably do more work than that, but I could see him on the upper limit getting a total of 2,254 scrimmage yards between passing and rushing. And I could see him ending up with a total of, say, 11, 12 touchdowns between receiving and rushing. I think he could be in line for a big season.
I would like to see that quite a bit. They just don't do it, though. The Cincinnati Bengals. It's not that Joe Mixon is not capable of doing it, because I really do believe he is.
Yep.
It's just more of the offensive structure, and especially when you throw in the fact that, well, they're kind of the opposite of the Ravens. You got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd, who's the third receiver who could be a second receiver on 90% of the teams.
Oh, yeah. Aaron Rodgers looks at him with lust in his heart.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, can they and will they are sort of the distinguishing line, I think.
Okay, my pet peeve of the week. Chase Claypool says he's a top 5 receiver. No, he's a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL.
He forgot to add the 0. I'm behind.
Yeah. Now, I'm looking at him like the next prima donna. last year I had him on my fantasy football team. This is he caught 2 touchdown passes for the whole year. Uh, I mean, I believe he caught what 500 yards less than Deontay Johnson.
Makes sense.
Yep.
I
You
could
know,
tell you exactly, but yeah, that definitely makes sense.
so stats said he's not even number one on the team, let alone in the whole NFL.
Well, he
What's your
wasn't even number
thoughts?
2 on the team. I think Fryermuth was the number 2, right?
Fryermuth probably was the number 2.
Yeah, and this is with Big Ben.
Or Najee Harris too. You could say Najee
Oh
Harris.
wow, I forgot about that. So he may have not even been the number 3 on the team,
Right.
huh? Well, there's
Yeah.
food for thought.
So, Mike, I mean, how did these guys? I mean, can you look at his stats?
Yeah. So
One of the things last year was how many drops he had, not many, how many passes he caught.
Oh, and third down celebrations during
oh yes.
drills too. Don't
I
forget those.
forgot about that.
He
That
did
is
lead the
so true.
team in that.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So he was third in receptions.
Who was third?
With 59, but he was only 20 ahead of Ray McLeod. So
Yikes! And where was he in yards on the team?
yards, he was second.
Second,
Behind Deontay Johnson.
second in yards, but he was like what, 4th or 5th in touchdown receptions?
But Deontay had over 1,000, and he had less than 1,000, right?
Oh, way
Correct.
less.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where was he? Where was he in touchdown receptions? I mean,
he was third in touchdown receptions, one behind Najee Harris.
one behind Najee. Okay.
Yeah. And remember, he only caught 2 touchdowns. The year before, he caught 8, I believe.
That makes sense. I know he had like 4 in one game too. His rookie season, he had like 4 in one game.
Yeah, so that means he had 4 for the last whatever how many games it was other than that one.
Yeah,
and then this year he catches 2.
2, right?
And I'm the third best wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't know what about that.
I mean, come on, some of you guys, you dynasty guys. I mean, like I said, I think half the year I kept him on the bench because I was afraid to put him in my fantasy league.
Yeah. So
where do you guys have him?
Good news. The good news.
Where do you guys have him ranked in dynasty?
Not in the top 3. So the good news, I do believe he's gonna have something of a bounce back here. I think that the change at quarterback helps him, and I think that he just won't suck as badly this year. But top 3 is hilarious. Top 30 isn't even quite right. I mean, I don't know what the number is. Maybe Mike can help you there, but he might be in the top 50.
Yeah, 50
with a question
maybe.
mark. With a question mark. So, yeah, I mean, he's. I mean, Josh Palmer might outproduce him this year. It's gonna be interesting to see where he lands this year. But I think he's gonna have a better year this year than last year. I do believe that.
4 touchdowns. Okay.
Yeah, I think part of the reason. I mean, Chase Claypool as if you're going to look at traits, right, as a receiver, he's pretty good. He's not great. He's not bad. He's pretty good. He's okay, a little bit above, I would say. Okay, and also a lot of it has to do with the fact that Ben Roethlisberger was only throwing like 1 or 2 yards per pass. So when you have someone who's a deep threat like Claypool, you ain't going to get the ball. Now I think that'll change a little bit with either Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky, but I don't see this over dramatic change for Chase Claypool at all.
Yeah, like I said, kind of like my pet peeve of the week. But Mike, let's talk a little bit about your defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley. What do you think how successful is he going to be this year?
Well, It helps when you have Jonathan Taylor as your running back, so that'll make things easier for him. When you have Matt Ryan as your quarterback, that's going to really make things easier for him. Where the challenge is going to come from is Michael Pittman an elite receiver? We haven't seen that yet. Alec Pierce, the rookie that they drafted, be the deep threat that they've been coveting for several seasons now. Of course, he's a rookie, so we don't have an answer to that. Is Paris Campbell finally going to stay healthy?
No, I'm sorry.
No. And then the tight end position's gone under such a huge change as well because Jack Doyle, of course, retired. They brought in Jelani Woods, who looks like a marvelous, athletic freak. And they still have Mo Alley Cox, who's more of just a goal line kind of guy than anything else. So there is some major questions, especially at wide receiver and tight end, but he has a lot of, offensive line, I should say, too. It's going to help. So great offensive line, great quarterback, amazing top tier, number one running back, but definitely receivers and tight ends, question marks.
Let's see. Oh, that's right. You got the Matt Ryan and Nick Foles.
Yeah, they brought in Nick Foles almost like immediately after Carson Wentz left. They traded Carson Wentz to Washington. They were like, Frank Reich's like, hey, you remember when you won that Super Bowl for the Eagles? And I was like, your offensive coordinator. You want to try to do that again in case Matt Ryan goes down?
How much pressure do you feel that Russell Wilson is under when now everybody is making the Broncos contenders? Have they forgotten? You talk about in the NBA, we talk about the West. I mean, when you talk about that AFC West in that division, really, you expect Russell Wilson to outplay Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert? I mean, guys that have had some time and some stability with their teams. What do you think? Are we expecting too much of Russell Wilson his first year with Denver?
I think it depends on what too much is. I think if you're
they got him making the playoffs. Some people got him going to the Super Bowl. I mean,
well, those are called Denver Broncos fans.
yeah. They either got to be Denver and if definitely too much for anything I would say above wild card is expecting too much. So if expectations are making the playoffs, I can go with that. But anything above that, then they're just losing their mind because they finally have a good quarterback since, I don't know, Trevor Siemian or Joe Flacco. I mean, none of these guys are good, right? But what was the last good quarterback? Talking about like,
I mean, are we not counting Peyton?
John Elway?
Yeah, it's got to be Peyton, right?
It's got to be Peyton.
Yeah, that's okay.
I mean,
Peyton,
we all enjoyed the Brock Osweiler experiment.
Yeah, the awesome.
It didn't quite play out the way they expected.
Those were awesome.
When you get all that money and then you get beaten out by Trevor Siemian, I mean, what more can you say?
Yeah,
that's everything to me. When Trevor Siemian beats you out, they've given you all. Was it $25 million?
Oh no, I think it was even more than that.
Was it more? Right, I think it was more.
It was insane. I was like,
why wasn't I born a foot taller and white?
There you go.
Man. Because that's all that Brock Osweiler had going for him was being tall and white. Because that's it.
That was it.
That was
John Elway loves it, though.
That was all. That's all he had. He was thinking of barrel wearing. He was a barrel wearing version of Nick Foles. And somebody
right.
Mike, your schedule includes the AFC West.
That's not good.
Yeah, have you seen your schedule?
I saw it, but to keep the track of the teams in my head, no, I know like they play Minnesota one week,
And you
then
play Mahomes, you play Herbert. Uh, let's see. Uh, well, you start out pretty good though. At
yeah,
Houston, then Jacksonville, then
yeah.
Kansas City, Tennessee, Denver, Jacksonville. But uh, the bottom half of your schedule, uh, kind of hit and miss. You do finish out with Houston and the Giants, but before that, you play Minnesota. You got a bye. You got Dallas. Oh, we play you on Monday Night Football on the 28th.
Oh, that would be fun. Who's home? Who's home on that game?
We are the Steelers.
The Steelers.
Yeah. The week before that, you play Philadelphia, Vegas, New England, Washington, Tennessee,
Huh.
Jacksonville, and what's this Thursday night at Denver? Thursday
That
night,
should be fun too.
yeah, October 6th. So, yeah, we had predicted. Well, I think you had kind of predicted your season, but what are you expecting on your duo? Who's it going to be? Is it going to be the new kid? Is it Pierce, the new
Oh,
kid?
Pierce. Yeah.
What's your expectations for him now that or like I said before, do you think that you're going to have a veteran Ty coming back just to kind of stabilize the locker room? Even though I mean, you got Matty Ice, you got Nick Foles, but what's your thoughts on that?
I still do. I mean, even though, as you pointed out, those are good examples for veterans. I always believe that you should have one veteran, at least a solid veteran, in the the room, right? So you have the right wide receiver room, the running back room, blah blah, so forth and so on. There is a lot of young pieces in that Colts wide receiver room, and even though Reggie Wayne is the wide receiver coach, you still want to have a player. So I would love to see T.Y. Hilton come back. It would depend on him and the salary and what he feels and all that kind of stuff. But if they could sign T.Y. Hilton or Julio Jones or someone that has that veteran where you're not counting on him to produce week in and week out, that would be amazing. I would take that in a second.
Over or under, guys. Christian McCaffrey plays 10 games next year.
Well, for the sake of the children of the Rule family, and maybe his brother Mike as well, I'm going to hope that that's over 10. And of course, for the fantasy community, Mike, I'm going to throw a bone to the fantasy community. I'm going to say over, not 17, not 16, maybe not even 15, but over 10, over 11.
I agree with Bill. I'm hoping 14 to 15 games. It's really hard for running backs.
15, yes, that seems about right.
Yeah, they just can't stay healthy. But if they miss 2 games, 3 games, that's okay.
Right.
Well, I know we're going to start talking fantasy pretty soon, guys, but right now, who would be some of the guys that you would look for in your top 5?
Ooh, that's a good question. It depends, I would say, on is this a 2 quarterback league or 1 quarterback league?
Let's make it a 2 quarterback league.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Well, probably Josh Allen would be definitely in the top 5 there. Patrick Mahomes, maybe not either Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert would be in the top 5 with Josh Allen. And then, of course, you got Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Jonathan Taylor would probably be, if not the number 1, at least number 2. And then maybe a CeeDee Lamb. I don't know if that's 5, but yeah, something to that effect.
What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, speaking of LSU being wide receiver U, continue to put up ludicrous seasons. They're both in offenses that feature them, even though there's other good receivers. And that's actually, I think, helps them a little bit, right? Because you can't just simply say we're going to constantly roll everything towards these guys, because then you end up getting gutted by one of their other good receivers. So a lot of people get nervous when there's more than one good receiver on the team. It's like, no. That's what you actually prefer that, because if you're in a situation where there's nobody else that scares you, that's why Tyreek Hill, though he's had to share the load in Kansas City. But the reason that people couldn't just take him away is because if you tried, you just got murdered underneath by Travis Kelce, or even though it wasn't consistent, Demarcus Robinson would go off every once in a while, or
Byron Pringle, or
the other really fast guy who isn't Tyreek Hill, who would go off every once in a while, have 2 touchdowns and 111 yards receiving on just 3 catches sometimes. That's all you need when you're throwing the ball 50 yards. So I think both those guys are going to have monster years. Jonathan Taylor, as was previously mentioned, will continue to be a monster. And I think Mahomes continues to put up ludicrous numbers. Allen, both running and passing, continues to put up crazy numbers. And I'm going to give, if you are in a 2-quarterback league, I'm going to give one other sort of dark horse. Watch out for this guy in like a super flex or a 2 QB league. Watch out for Jameis Winston to have a monster year.
I like him.
Watch out for Jameis to be a guy that puts up top 6 quarterback, top 5, maybe even quarterback, maybe not 5, but top 6. I wouldn't be surprised if he has like a top 6 fantasy year.
Yeah. I hope he gets back to. He was just starting to become like consistent. I mean, he had a couple of good games that were really weird. Like he threw like 5 touchdowns for 150 yards or something.
Yeah, right. That was the game, right? 153 yards and 5 touchdowns. I remember that.
Yeah, crazy stuff like that. But right when he got injured, it looked like he was starting to really get it going, and hopefully that carries forward into week 1.
Yeah, I'm claiming that for him. I think the light is coming on for him, and it was never physical. He always had all the physical ability you wanted. It was mental. And as now he's in a situation where the pressure's kind of off. People aren't expecting too much from the Saints this year. And I think he's going to ball out.
It reminds me, since you brought up Jameis Winston, I think the first time we met, Bill, was on a podcast where we both debated Jameis Winston and how good he was going to be.
Yep, you're correct. That is how we met. And Jameis is still a divisive figure to this point in his career. There's still Jameis defenders out there, and there always will be. And there's people who are convinced that essentially the fates have sabotaged him or whatever. And there's people who think that he's garbage, right? And of course, I think the truth is, as often is the case, is somewhere between the two.
Somewhere in between,
right? He is a guy with top 6'7" physical talent, and always has been. He's got a beautiful arm. He can throw any kind of pass that you could ever want to throw. He has not always been coached perfectly for the kind of quarterback that he is. Dirk Cutter tried to change certain things around about him and installed. And I'm not saying that Jameis isn't a smart guy, because he is, but he tried to put all of the offense on him immediately, right? It's like, oh, here's all the offense, blah, right? And instead of saying, I'm going to slowly work this in, no, here's my offense, run it, And I mean, a few guys can do that. Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck.
Yeah, like
Joe
you
Burrow.
said.
I mean, it's a short list, though. Like, it's not like there's not many times we can just say, here's the whole offense, run the whole thing right away.
Run it, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Justin Herbert, right? But that's a short list. It's not a bunch of guys that don't need time. And so that was part of it. And then Bruce Arians says, don't worry about interceptions. Well, that's the wrong guy to say that to.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I don't think you quite understood who you were dealing with. Oh, he was like, say less, So maybe that whole no risk it, no biscuit wasn't the perfect thing for young Jameis to hear. So he's finding a situation where they're saying take responsible risk, take calculated risk. Hey, if we get this look, then go ahead and swing your sword. But other than that, check it down. Right? I think he's finally in an offense and in a situation in his career where he's not trying to prove that he should be the number 1 pick overall, right? He's no longer trying to prove all that stuff. I think he's settled down to his career, being benched and all these other things. I think has settled him down. He's matured, and I think he's going to play his best football.
Well, starting July, we will have a fantasy session, so I will be dependent on you guys. Bill, your final thoughts for the evening, my man. As always, good having you.
Well, sadly, my final thoughts are sad. As we earlier prefaced, both Tony Saragusa, who was 55 years of age, which is not much older than I am, I remember him distinctly his entire football career from when I
Young
first saw him
pups.
at Pitt.
Boy.
From his first time I saw him at Pitt, where he started playing in rotation as a sophomore, and then eventually took over the zero, the nose full time the next year, and was a 2-year starter, full time starter. And he was a delight to watch even then. I mean, his personality came through even then. You'd see him come off the field. He'd be yelling stuff at people, yelling at his own offense sometimes, yelling at his own defense sometimes when he wasn't on the field, yelling at himself sometimes if he thought he made a bad play, pumping guys up, ripping guys sometimes you thought they needed to be ripped. And then he goes to, a situation where, as you pointed out, a team that no one thought was going to do anything. He's part of that semi-miracle season that they had in Indianapolis. They move on from him. He ends up, as you said, going to a perfect situation. Again, the Ravens are a team that's about rough and tumble. It's about tough guys. It's about guys who know their role and do their role, and he's just that. And he eventually gets to play with Haloti Ngata, sometimes spelling him, sometimes in certain situations, short yardage and goal line, where they're both stacked right next to each other. 700 and whatever pounds of human being in the middle of a defense. God help you. Who's going to block all that, right? And we lost him far too soon. But even more tragic is young Jalen Ferguson, who I got to know a little bit during his pre-draft process. And once again, a delightful young man, sack daddy, as they called him, come out of Louisiana Tech, with a couple of very young children. Speaking of young children, I see Mike has his fur baby. But, a father to young children, which makes this all the more hard to bear. And I don't care. I don't want to say I don't care. Whatever the circumstances of his death, this still sucks. I mean, there's nothing about it, the circumstances of his death, that would change the fact that this is a terrible thing. A young man that was right on the precipice of maybe, finally delivering on all the greatness that we saw from him in college. He was going to get his chance to fight for a starting job with Owe and the other kid they have at pass rusher. Owe and the other raw African pass rusher. Oh God.
I know who you're thinking. I can't think of the name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name right now. But they were all going to be in the mix. And I believe he was going to, even if he ended up being a rotational guy, I think he was going to have a breakout year this season. So, I mean, it would be tragic no matter what. But his age and I think the opportunity he was going to have this year makes it just doubly, triply tragic. My heart goes out to his teammates, his family, his friends, the Ravens flock, which sounds funny for me to say as a Steelers fan. But today we are all rooting for that franchise, those people, those families, those friends, and those loved ones and teammates, even though, when we strap it up on Sundays and Thursdays and Mondays, we want to see them get, their heads caved in. Today, I am wrapping my arms around Ravens flock.
Second that, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, final thoughts?
Well, this is Andrew, and Andrew, as you can guess, is named after Andrew Luck, and a former Colts quarterback. Also, a former Colts quarterback was Peyton Manning, and he has a nephew, Archie Manning, who
Arch.
Arch. Yes, you are correct. Father Archie, nephew Arch, who accepted to Texas, and as the number one recruit in college football. So I definitely wish him well. It's going to be a very interesting quarterback battle.
Yeah, he and Quinn Ewers,
Quinn Ewers, absolutely. He was a 5-star himself. So that should be a lot of fun to watch, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. We'll see if Arch redshirts. There's a lot of rumors that he might, and I think that probably would be best to sort of separate any kind of like, is Arch going to come if Quinn Ewers is, struggling or any of that kind of pressure. Just for him to come in, learn. I don't think you'll have any problems learning the playbook. I mean, you got an uncle and Peyton and, and another uncle and
Uncles Peyton and Eli.
Eli and
right.
Archie.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you have Archie.
His grandmother Olivia could probably break down like a cover 6 or palms coverage or whatever. I mean,
Right. Exactly. So, congratulations to Arch Manning, and I'm looking definitely forward to seeing how that all plays out for him.
Yeah, we'll be talking to college football pretty soon too. So you guys will have your hats on. But a great show tonight. Glad to talk to everyone. Demetrius will be back next week. He's doing a draft party. I was surprised that Don didn't get here since we were talking about the Cowboys. And as you mentioned, Arch coming to Texas, but I'm sure he'll have a lot to say about it next week. So have a good night, guys. And hey, we might have set a record tonight. This might have been the earliest that we ever went off.
it is the earliest.
All right, guys. Well, enjoy the rest of your night, man. I'll see you next week.
Take care, gentlemen.
Yep.
All right.
Same to you guys. See you soon.
Yeah. Bill, you available Monday?